Before we start adding products to our online store, we have to create some categories where those products will actually be located in. So basically, categories are essential as basically they enable us to group equivalent products together, and the categories also help the customers find their way through our catalog a lot easier and to narrow down their search when they're looking for a specific type of a product. It also makes it a lot easier for the customers once they actually find the products to go ahead and compare them. Alright, so creating a category in Prestashop is quite easy. We'll just go to the catalog, and the second option there is the categories. In the categories, I have, as you can see, 0 categories, although it says here 5 empty categories, but this was actually created when we were working in a demo mode. This is not a demo mode, and therefore we have no records found of our categories. Let's go ahead and add some categories now. Okay, this is the typical category creation page. We have the name, we have whether or not we want to display, we have the parent category, the description, and a few other information including the images here, and probably the most important bit here is the group access. Okay, so my website is going to be selling some clothing, and the very first category that I would like to have and to enter here is men's fashion and clothing. Then we'll have to create another one which is going to be exactly the same, women's fashion and clothing, and then we'll actually create a few more subcategories. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's name this category men's fashion and clothing. Alright, everything else I can actually leave as blank. I can enter the image and the description here. The description will not be shown to anyone. This is only for the purposes for the actual webmaster to, if you have many different categories and then you have some which are a bit similar, you can enter the description here to actually have some more information about that particular category. Okay, I'm happy with how everything is looking. I'll hit on the save button. There it is. There's my fashion, men's fashion and clothing. Let's go now and add exactly the same for women. Alright, the name women's fashion and clothing is actually displayed. The parent category is set as home, and we'll hit on the save button. Alright, 2 categories I have there, and let's go ahead now and create some subcategories. The procedure is exactly the same. We'll hit on add new category here. The name here, so for example, I would like to have a category where I'm going to place, for example, men's jeans. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to name my category men's jeans. Right, it's still displayed. Now the only difference here is, since I'm creating a subcategory, I have to select a different parent category. Okay, so to do that, I'll move all the way to the right and hit on this expand all button. There I'll find my 2 categories I have just created, the men's fashion and clothing and the women's fashion and clothing. And since we're actually creating a category where I'm going to put men's jeans, I'll put that subcategory in this category, men's fashion and clothing. Alright, again, I can enter some information here, and I can enter some images as well. And basically I can change the group access here, whether or not I would like my visitors, for example, to have access to this group and the actual products within this group, since this is something that I do want to. So I'll leave it as it is and just hit on the save button. Okay, now we're actually in the category called men's fashion and clothing, and in this category we have one subcategory which is called men's jeans. Let's go ahead and create a new one. And this one I'm going to give a name. So this one's going to hold all my t-shirts, all my men t-shirts, and therefore I'll give it exactly that name. Alright, there's my men's t-shirts. I'm going to select a parent category which is going to be men's fashion and clothing, and straight away here you can see from this tree that you have another subcategory which is called men's jeans. And for example, if I wanted to divide this into different categories, maybe I can have different types of men's jeans, for example, slim and whatnot, but that's breaking down into a lot of different subcategories. And there's another way of actually doing this particular case. So for example, when you have slim jeans and whatnot. So my t-shirts, men t-shirts, is going to be in a parent category which is called men's fashion and clothing. I'll save that, and I'll hit on this button here which actually says back to the list. Alright, now I have men's fashion and clothing. There it is, that's my first category, and I also have women's fashion and clothing. If I click on men's fashion and clothing, I can see that from here that this is where I'm actually at, and I have the two subcategories. I can hit here on add a new category, and what I'll do is I'm going to create some subcategories for women's clothing. So for example, I can go women's t-shirts. Okay, so I gave it a name, women's t-shirts. Now I'll actually expand this as well, and this time I'm going to select the parent category as women's fashion and clothing. I'll save that, and I'll create another one, and this one I'm going to call, for example, women's dresses. Alright, add new category. I'll enter the name here. As for the parent category, I'll have to go and select the women's fashion and clothing, and I'll save that as well. Okay, so I have the two subcategories here, and let's go back now to the categories. My main two categories, men's fashion and clothing and women's fashion and clothing. Alright, in both of those cases I have two subcategories, which are actually, for example, for men to store the jeans and the t-shirts, and for women to actually store the t-shirts and dresses. You can create as many categories and subcategories as you would like, and basically this depends on the type of your online store and basically how many products you have. Okay, there's one more thing that I would like to do, and that's actually to set some attributes. Setting up the attributes is also pretty straightforward, so we'll go to the catalog and we'll go product attributes. At the moment I have 0 attributes. Basically the attributes are the basic product variations, so we can only create variations for a product if at least one of its attributes changes. So we can think about the attributes as some sort of a property of a product that may change between the variations while still keeping the same product name. So for example, in this case, since I'm dealing with clothing, we can actually enter some attributes such as, the color or the size, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Alright, so following pretty much the same procedure, I'm going to hit on add new attribute, not on add new value. I'm going to hit on add new attribute. When the page loads up, I have to enter the name, the public name, and if I want, I can actually specify a friendly URL, or basically it'll be specified automatically. I can enter the title and whether or not this is to be indexable and the actual attribute type. Alright, so it's going to be a drop down list, a radio button, or a color. Okay, so I've said I'm going to do colors, so let's go with color. Public name, we'll leave it as color. Alright, URL, that's going to be specified automatically, and also take a note of this little drop down menus here. So basically anytime you enter some sort of information, you can actually enter the language you're entering that information in. So at the moment I have English and French, as I have those two languages installed. But basically if you had different languages, you can use different alphabets and different spelling and grammar and everything else. Okay, this is indexable, and the attribute type is going to be color. Okay, so I'll hit on save. I've just created a very first attribute. However, there is 0 value count. Alright, so what we need to do is actually enter some new values, but let's go ahead before we do that and enter a new attribute. Alright, so I'll hit on the add new attribute button, and here I'll just put size. Alright, and public name exactly the same size. Let's move down to the attribute list. We can go with the drop down list, radio button, or color. We'll go with the drop down list for this particular attribute. Okay, once again I have 0 count values. Let's add some values, and to do so we'll actually go and hit on a add new value. Now the value will actually describe the attribute itself. Alright, here first of all we'll find the actual attribute group. So this is something that we have just created, and we have two options, color and size. Let's go with color, and value will go black for example, and the color has already been selected here as black. We can enter some texture here if we wanted to add a new file. Now I can hit on save, and if I click on save, this will actually end my adding of a values, but because I want to have different colors, I am going to hit on this button here, which actually says save, then add another value. Alright, once again I'm adding values for color, and I'm going to, for example, enter red. Now I'll select a different color by clicking here, and I'll select the color red and enter another value. Color once again, let's go with, for example, green. I'll find the value here, the actual color. Let's add another one, which might be blue, and I'll select the color blue. And let's go with one more, and let's say orange, for example, and I'll find the orange color here, which is this one here. Okay, so I've added a couple of different colors, and I'm happy with all the values that I have added for this particular attribute group, and I'm going to hit on save. Now this is going to save all the changes and bring me back to my product attribute page, which is displayed right here. So color, I have 5 different count values. Let's go ahead now and add some values for the size. The procedure is exactly the same. We'll click on the add new value, but this time we'll select the size, and let's go with, for example, let's make it simple, extra small, add another value. Then we have the small, the medium size, large size, and let's go with the extra large. Okay, so this is the last value that I would like to enter, and I'll hit on the save. So basically we have just created 2 different attribute groups, and we have created altogether 10 different values, 10 different value counts, and each one of those is actually got 5. So each attribute has got 5 value count.